The crystal chandelier caught Maya Chen's reflection as she balanced 4 plates along her left arm, the weight familiar after 3 years of serving tables at the Emerald Room. Steam rose from the lobster thermidor, carrying with it the scent of expensive butter and dreams deferred. She moved with practiced grace between the mahogany tables, each step deliberate, each smile genuine despite the ache in her feet from standing since dawn. "Table 12 needs their wine refilled," called Marcus, the sommelier, his voice cutting through the gentle hum of Manhattan's elite dining on their Tuesday evening rituals. Maya nodded, already calculating the steps to the wine station, then to the kitchen, then back to check on the elderly couple at table 4 who always ordered their salmon well done and left generous tips with handwritten thank you notes. The Emerald Room wasn't just any restaurant. Nestled on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, it commanded a view of Central Park that cost more per meal than most people earned in a week. Maya had learned to navigate this world of power lunches and anniversary celebrations where conversations about stock portfolios mixed with the clink of silverware against bone china. She understood the unspoken rules: be invisible when they wanted privacy, be attentive when they needed something, and never, ever let them see you as anything more than part of the furniture. Tonight felt different, though she couldn't place why. Perhaps it was the way the autumn lights slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in amber. Or maybe it was the letter folded in her apron pocket, the one from Julliard that had arrived that morning, still unopened, because she wasn't ready for another rejection. At 26, Maya had collected enough "we regret to inform you" letters to wallpaper her studio apartment in Queens. "Maya, sweetheart, you're a lifesaver," whispered Mrs. Patterson from table 7, pressing a folded 20 into Maya's palm as she refilled the water glasses. "Jonathan, it's been impossible all day. Your smile is the first thing that's made him bearable." Her husband, a steel-haired man in his 70s, actually blushed, and Maya felt that familiar warmth that came from connecting with people, even in small moments. She had always been able to do that, find the humanity in others, coax out their better angels with genuine kindness. It was a gift her grandmother had recognized when Maya was just 7 years old, standing on a kitchen chair to help make dumplings for the Chinese New Year. "You have a heart that speaks all languages, little star," her nai had said, flour dusting both their hands as they worked side by side. "Remember that when the world tries to make you small." The memory flickered through Maya's mind as she approached table 15, where 3 men in tailored suits were deep in conversation about merger acquisitions and tax shelters. She refilled their water glasses with practiced efficiency, becoming part of the background noise, until one of them, a man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, looked up. "Excuse me, miss, could we get another bottle of the Chateau Margaux?" "Of course, sir, right away." Maya's voice carried the professional warmth she'd perfected, but something in the man's tone made her pause. He'd said please and actually made eye contact, treating her like a person rather than a service bot. As she turned toward the wine cellar, she heard one of his companions scoff. "Still saying please help, David? You're too soft for this business." David, she recognized him now as David Sterling, whose face appeared regularly in the financial pages, simply smiled. "Treating people with respect isn't soft, it's basic decency." Maya pretended not to hear as she descended the narrow stairs to the wine cellar, but the exchange stayed with her. In her 3 years at the Emerald Room, she'd served titans of industry and socialites, politicians and celebrities. Most treated her with polite indifference, some with casual dismissal, but genuine kindness? That was rarer than the vintage wine she was now selecting from temperature-controlled racks. The Chateau Margaux, a bottle worth more than her monthly rent, felt surprisingly light in her hands as she climbed back upstairs. She'd learned not to think about the mathematics of inequality that surrounded her daily. The cost of one appetizer here could cover her subway pass for a month. The wine she carried could pay for 3 months of voice lessons with Professor Martinez, the only teacher who'd ever believed she had real talent. "Your Chateau Margaux, gentlemen," Maya presented the bottle with a practiced ceremony, waiting for David Sterling's approving nod before beginning the ritual of uncorking. The wine breathed expensive perfection into the air, dark and complex as the city lights began to twinkle beyond the windows. "Thank you," David said again, and Maya found herself genuinely smiling in return. It was such a small thing, basic courtesy, yet it felt like sunlight after rain. She was turning to check on her other tables when the hostess, Jessica, appeared at her elbow with an expression Maya had learned to dread. Jessica's perfectly glossed lips were pressed thin, and her eyes held that particular glint that meant trouble was walking through the front door. "Maya, I need you to take table 21. It's the Sterling party." Maya's stomach dropped. Not because of David Sterling. He just proven himself to be one of the decent ones. But table 21 was the corner booth, the power table where the restaurant's most demanding clients held court. And if Jessica's expression was any indication, someone in the Sterling party wasn't going to be as pleasant as David Sterling. The crystal chandelier caught Maya Chen's reflection as she balanced 4 plates along her left arm, the weight familiar after 3 years of serving tables at the Emerald Room. Steam rose from the lobster thermidor, carrying with it the scent of expensive butter and dreams deferred. She moved with practiced grace between the mahogany tables, each step deliberate, each smile genuine despite the ache in her feet from standing since dawn. "Table 12 needs their wine refilled," called Marcus, the sommelier, his voice cutting through the gentle hum of Manhattan's elite dining on their Tuesday evening rituals. Maya nodded, already calculating the steps to the wine station, then to the kitchen, then back to check on the elderly couple at table 4 who always ordered their salmon well done and left generous tips with handwritten thank you notes. The Emerald Room wasn't just any restaurant. Nestled on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, it commanded a view of Central Park that cost more per meal than most people earned in a week. Maya had learned to navigate this world of power lunches and anniversary celebrations where conversations about stock portfolios mixed with the clink of silverware against bone china. She understood the unspoken rules: be invisible when they wanted privacy, be attentive when they needed something, and never, ever let them see you as anything more than part of the furniture. Tonight felt different, though she couldn't place why. Perhaps it was the way the autumn lights slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in amber. Or maybe it was the letter folded in her apron pocket, the one from Julliard that had arrived that morning, still unopened, because she wasn't ready for another rejection. At 26, Maya had collected enough "we regret to inform you" letters to wallpaper her studio apartment in Queens. "Maya, sweetheart, you're a lifesaver," whispered Mrs. Patterson from table 7, pressing a folded 20 into Maya's palm as she refilled the water glasses. "Jonathan, it's been impossible all day. Your smile is the first thing that's made him bearable." Her husband, a steel-haired man in his 70s, actually blushed, and Maya felt that familiar warmth that came from connecting with people, even in small moments. She had always been able to do that, find the humanity in others, coax out their better angels with genuine kindness. It was a gift her grandmother had recognized when Maya was just 7 years old, standing on a kitchen chair to help make dumplings for the Chinese New Year. "You have a heart that speaks all languages, little star," her nai had said, flour dusting both their hands as they worked side by side. "Remember that when the world tries to make you small." The memory flickered through Maya's mind as she approached table 15, where 3 men in tailored suits were deep in conversation about merger acquisitions and tax shelters. She refilled their water glasses with practiced efficiency, becoming part of the background noise, until one of them, a man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, looked up. "Excuse me, miss, could we get another bottle of the Chateau Margaux?" "Of course, sir, right away." Maya's voice carried the professional warmth she'd perfected, but something in the man's tone made her pause. He'd said please and actually made eye contact, treating her like a person rather than a service bot. As she turned toward the wine cellar, she heard one of his companions scoff. "Still saying please help, David? You're too soft for this business." David, she recognized him now as David Sterling, whose face appeared regularly in the financial pages, simply smiled. "Treating people with respect isn't soft, it's basic decency." Maya pretended not to hear as she descended the narrow stairs to the wine cellar, but the exchange stayed with her. In her 3 years at the Emerald Room, she'd served titans of industry and socialites, politicians and celebrities. Most treated her with polite indifference, some with casual dismissal. But genuine kindness? That was rarer than the vintage wine she was now selecting from temperature-controlled racks. The Chateau Margaux, a bottle worth more than her monthly rent, felt surprisingly light in her hands as she climbed back upstairs. She'd learned not to think about the mathematics of inequality that surrounded her daily. The cost of one appetizer here could cover her subway pass for a month. The wine she carried could pay for 3 months of voice lessons with Professor Martinez, the only teacher who'd ever believed she had real talent. "Your Chateau Margaux, gentlemen." Maya presented the bottle with a practiced ceremony, waiting for David Sterling's approving nod before beginning the ritual of uncorking. The wine breathed expensive perfection into the air, dark and complex as the city lights began to twinkle beyond the windows. "Thank you," David said again, and Maya found herself genuinely smiling in return. It was such a small thing, basic courtesy, yet it felt like sunlight after rain. She was turning to check on her other tables when the hostess, Jessica, appeared at her elbow with an expression Maya had learned to dread. Jessica's perfectly glossed lips were pressed thin, and her eyes held that particular glint that meant trouble was walking through the front door. "Maya, I need you to take table 21. It's the Sterling party." Maya's stomach dropped. Not because of David Sterling. He'd just proven himself to be one of the decent ones. But table 21 was the corner booth, the power table where the restaurant's most demanding clients held court. And if Jessica's expression was any indication, someone in the Sterling party wasn't going to be as pleasant as David Sterling.
"How many?" Maya asked, already mentally preparing herself. 6. It's David Sterling's younger brother, Brandon, hosting some kind of celebration dinner. He specifically requested our most experienced server, but... Jessica hesitated, lowering her voice. He also made some comments about wanting someone easy on the eyes to impress his guests. I'm sorry, Maya. You know I wouldn't normally... It's fine. Maya interrupted, though it wasn't. She'd dealt with men like that before. The ones who saw her as decoration rather than a professional. But she needed this job, and the Emerald Room paid better than anywhere else she'd worked. What's the occasion? Something about a new art acquisition. Apparently, Brandon just bought some painting for $30 million and wants to celebrate. Jessica's tone suggested she found the whole thing distasteful. As the daughter of a Brooklyn firefighter, Jessica understood the disconnect between this world and the real one outside these windows. Maya straightened her shoulders and checked her appearance in the mirror behind the bar. Her black hair was still perfectly pinned in a low bun, her white shirt crisp despite hours of service. She looked professional, competent, invisible in all the right ways. She'd learned to armor herself in competence, to let her skill speak louder than whatever assumptions people made about the young Asian woman bringing their food.
"Well, well," Brandon said, his voice carrying that particular tone Maya had learned to recognize. The sound of a man who believed his wealth made him charming, rather than simply loud. "Maya, is it? That's exotic. Where are you from, Maya?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with being reduced to her appearance. Her name turned into something foreign and other. She'd been born in Sacramento, had grown up speaking English and Mandarin in equal measure, had been valedictorian of her high school class and debate team captain. But in moments like these, all of that ceased to matter. "I'm originally from California, sir. Can I start you with something to drink?" She redirected smoothly, pen poised over her notepad. But Brandon Sterling wasn't done with his performance. "California, huh? Well, you're certainly prettier than the usual help they send over. Isn't she, gentlemen?" He gestured broadly to his companions, who offered the kind of uncomfortable chuckles that came from men who knew they were witnessing something distasteful, but lacked the courage to intervene. Maya's smile never wavered, though she felt her grandmother's words echo in her mind like a protective charm. She had survived worse than this. She could survive Brandon Sterling's need to perform his own importance at her expense. The question was whether she should, or whether tonight might be different. The letter in her pocket seemed to pulse with possibility as she waited for their drink orders, not knowing that in less than 2 hours she would be standing on a stage, microphone in hand, about to deliver words that would change everything. Maya's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., the same time it had for the past 3 years, cutting through the thin walls of her studio apartment in Astoria like a knife through tissue paper. She rolled over, squinting at the crack of dawn light filtering through curtains she'd sewn herself from fabric remnants found in Chinatown. The apartment was barely 400 square feet, with a kitchen that was more suggestion than reality, and a bathroom so small she had to step into the hallway to fully open the door. But it was hers. Every month, when she signed that rent check for $1,800, money that could have funded a semester at a decent music school, she reminded herself that independence had its own value. No roommates meant no one to judge her pre-dawn vocal exercises, no one to ask uncomfortable questions about why a Stanford graduate with a degree in linguistics was slinging plates instead of pursuing translation work or diplomatic service. The truth was both simpler and more complicated than anyone might guess. Maya had come to New York with a plan, just not the one her parents had expected. While they thought she was pursuing graduate work in international relations, she'd been using her savings to pay for voice lessons, to audition for conservatories, to chase the dream that had been singing in her chest since childhood. Her morning routine was a sacred ritual. First, 20 minutes of yoga on a mat she'd bought secondhand, stretching muscles that would spend the next 12 hours on her feet. Then vocal warm-ups, starting with gentle humming that gradually built to scales and arpeggios. Her voice, a rich contralto with unexpected power in the higher registers, filled the small space like liquid gold. In these moments, alone with her music, Maya felt most herself. Not the waitress, not the dutiful daughter, but the artist she'd always known she was meant to be. The shower was lukewarm at best, another reminder of the building's age and her landlord's indifference to tenant comfort. As she washed her hair with drugstore shampoo, Maya's mind wandered to the letter still sitting unopened on her kitchen counter. Julliard. The name alone carried weight, promise, possibility. She'd auditioned 3 times over the past 2 years, each rejection more devastating than the last. This would be her final attempt. At 26, she was already older than most applicants, already carrying the weight of dreams deferred. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Babe, when are you coming home for a visit? Your father is asking about your research." Maya stared at the message, guilt twisting in her stomach like hunger pangs. She'd been lying to her parents for 3 years, crafting elaborate stories about her fictional graduate program, about research assistantships that didn't exist, about a life that was respectable and predictable in all the ways her real life wasn't. David and Linda Chen had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s with engineering degrees and unshakable faith in the American dream. They'd worked double shifts, saved every penny, pushed their only daughter towards excellence in everything she touched. Maya's perfect SAT scores, her full scholarship to Stanford, her academic honors, these were the fruits of their sacrifice, proof that their gamble on America had paid off. How could she tell them that she'd thrown it all away to chase something as impractical as music?
How could she explain that standing on a stage, feeling a song flow through her like electricity, was worth more than any conventional success? They'd sacrificed so much for her security, and she'd chosen uncertainty instead. The subway ride to Manhattan was a study in contrasts. Maya pressed herself into the corner of the N train, surrounded by other early morning commuters. Construction workers heading to luxury developments they'd never afford to live in. Housekeepers traveling to clean homes in neighborhoods where they were invisible. Hotel workers beginning shifts that would end long before the city's elite had gone to bed. This was the army of service workers that kept New York functioning, the people who made other people's dreams possible while deferring their own.
Maya's stop was Times Square, where she transferred to the 6 train that would take her to the Upper East Side. The transition from the gritty honesty of Queens to the polished perfection of Manhattan never failed to feel like stepping between worlds. By the time she emerged from the subway at 68th Street, she'd already begun the mental transformation from Maya the dreamer to Maya the waitress, compartmentalizing her aspirations until her shift ended. The employee entrance to the Emerald Room was through the building's service corridor, a utilitarian space of concrete and fluorescent lights that contrasted sharply with the marble and mahogany luxury guests experienced. Maya changed into her uniform in the cramped locker room she shared with the other servers, busboys, and kitchen staff. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a professional, composed woman with perfect posture and a practiced smile. No one looking at her would guess that she'd spent her morning working on Puccini arias. "Morning, sunshine," called Carlos, the head busboy, as Maya clocked in. He was 62, had been working in restaurants since he was 14, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of wine service that would put most sommeliers to shame. He'd never been promoted beyond busboy, though, and they both understood why. In places like the Emerald Room, certain faces were allowed in the front of house, others were relegated to the back. "Morning, Carlos. How's Maria doing?" Maya had met his wife only once, but she made a point of remembering the details that mattered. Maria was fighting breast cancer, and Carlos picked up extra shifts whenever possible to cover her medical bills. "Good days and bad days," he said with the resigned pragmatism of someone who'd learned to take life as it came. "But the doctors are optimistic." He handed her the day's seating chart, already marked with notes about regular customers and their preferences. "Mrs. Patterson is coming in at noon. She specifically asked for you." Maya smiled genuinely for the first time that morning. Mrs. Patterson had been coming to the Emerald Room for 15 years, always ordering the same thing, Caesar salad, salmon, and a glass of Sancerre. But more than that, she saw Maya as a person, remembered details about her life, asked about her dreams with the kind of genuine interest Maya's own relatives rarely showed. The pre-service meeting was the same as always, Chef Bernard reminding them about the evening specials, the sommelier discussing new wine pairings, the restaurant manager, a thin, nervous man named Gerald, reviewing the VIP reservations that required extra attention. Maya half listened while mentally rehearsing the song she'd been working on, a hauntingly beautiful piece by Sarah McLachlan that showcased her range. "Maya, you'll be taking the Sterling party tonight at 21. 6 people, celebration dinner. They've requested our most experienced server." He paused, and Maya caught the meaningful look he exchanged with Jessica at the host station. "Just be extra attentive." Maya nodded, though something cold settled in her stomach. In restaurant code, extra attentive often meant smile through whatever inappropriate behavior comes your way. She learned to navigate these situations with grace, to deflect unwanted attention with professional courtesy, to protect herself while still providing excellent service. It was a delicate dance performed daily by women in service industries everywhere. The lunch shift passed in its usual rhythm. Maya served Mrs. Patterson, who asked about her music and pressed an extra 20 into her palm with a whisper, "For your voice lessons, dear." She waited on a table of international businessmen who conducted their entire meal in rapid-fire Mandarin, not realizing she understood every word of their conversation about market manipulation. She brought anniversary champagne to a couple celebrating 50 years of marriage, their joys so genuine it made her eyes water. Between customers, Maya found herself touching the letter in her apron pocket like a talisman. Julliard represented everything she'd been working toward, the validation that might finally convince her parents that music wasn't just a hobby, but a calling. If she got in, she could finally tell them the truth about her life, about the choice she'd made to pursue art over security. But if the letter contained another rejection, Maya wasn't sure she had the strength to keep going. 3 years of double shifts and vocal lessons paid for with tip money. 3 years of lying to everyone who loved her. 3 years of watching other people's dreams come true while hers remained perpetually out of reach. The afternoon brought a lull, the quiet period between lunch and dinner, when Maya usually grabbed a quick meal in the employee break room. Today, she found herself standing by the windows, looking out at Central Park's golden autumn foliage. Somewhere in that urban forest, people were living lives unburdened by the weight of deferred dreams. Families having picnics, artists painting landscapes, musicians busking for donations and pure love of the craft. "Penny for your thoughts?" Jessica joined her at the window, holding 2 cups of coffee that kept us all functional through 14-hour shifts. "Just thinking about choices," Maya said, accepting the coffee gratefully, "about whether the things we sacrifice are worth what we get in return."
Maya nodded. Jessica was one of the few people who knew about her real dreams, who'd covered for her when she needed to leave early for auditions, who'd listened without judgment when Maya confessed her fears about disappointing her parents. "You know what I think?" Jessica stirred sugar into her coffee thoughtfully. "I think some dreams are worth every sacrifice. I think some dreams are so much a part of who you are that giving up on them is like giving up on breathing. The question isn't whether it's worth it. The question is whether you can live with yourself if you don't try." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I've been fooling myself this whole time?" "Then at least you'll know," Jessica said gently. "At least you'll know you gave it everything you had. That's more than most people can say." The dinner shift began at 5, and with it came the familiar transformation of the Emerald Room from quiet elegance to buzzing social hub. Maya tied her apron with practiced efficiency, checked her hair in the mirror one last time, and prepared to step back into her role as professional invisible woman. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the letter burning in her pocket, or Jessica's words echoing in her mind, or simply the accumulated weight of 3 years of living someone else's version of her life. As she walked toward table 21, where Brandon Sterling and his companions were already seated and laughing too loudly, Maya felt something shifting inside her chest. She'd spent 3 years being the perfect waitress, the dutiful daughter, the careful immigrant's child who never made waves. She'd smiled through condescension, deflected inappropriate comments with grace, accepted the role of supporting character in other people's stories. But tonight, Maya Chen was tired of being invisible. She just didn't know yet that the universe was about to give her a chance to be seen. The Sterling party had been loud from the moment they arrived, their boisterous energy filling the corner booth like an overinflated balloon threatening to burst. Maya approached their table with practiced composure, but she could already sense the undercurrent of entitled aggression that seemed to radiate from Brandon Sterling like heat from asphalt. "Well, well, Maya," Brandon said, drawing out her name like he was tasting wine. "Isn't she, gentlemen?" His companions, a mix of Wall Street types and what appeared to be art dealers, offered the uncomfortable laughter of men who weren't quite sure how far their host intended to push things, but were too invested in their business relationships to object. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Maya asked, her voice professionally neutral while her grip tightened slightly on her notepad. "Oh, she's all business. I like that. Very efficient, very oriental." He said the word like it was sophisticated rather than antiquated, ignorant of its implications or simply not caring.
Maya felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but she'd learned to transform that heat into fuel for perfect service. "We have an excellent wine selection, sir. Perhaps I could recommend something to complement your meal." "Actually," Brandon leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "I'm curious about you, Maya. What's a smart girl like you serving tables? I mean, you speak English perfectly, no accent at all. Very impressive." The condescension in his voice was so thick it was practically visible. One of his companions, a nervous-looking man in wire-rimmed glasses, shifted uncomfortably. "Brandon, maybe we should just order." "Nonsense, Richard. I'm making conversation with our lovely server. Maya, you must have quite a story. Did you come here on one of those little boats, or was it the Underground Railroad kind of situation?" Brandon's ignorance was so profound it was almost artistic, mixing metaphors and centuries of different immigration experiences into one offensive soup. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The letter in her pocket seemed to pulse against her hip, and she found herself thinking about Jessica's words. Some dreams are worth every sacrifice. But was dignity part of that sacrifice? "I was born in California, sir. Now, about those drinks." "Well, that explains the perfect English. Though I have to say, you've got that exotic look that's very popular these days. Very authentic. I just bought a Ming vase for my collection. $30 million. You'd appreciate it. It's from your homeland."
The other men at the table were now openly cringing, recognizing that their host had crossed from tactless into actively offensive. But Maya had worked in service long enough to know that confronting a customer, especially one spending the kind of money Brandon Sterling clearly was, would mean losing her job. And she needed this job. The letter in her pocket might contain her future, but it might also contain another dead end. The Ming dynasty was indeed known for exceptional artistry, Maya said carefully. "Now, I'd be happy to tell you about our wine pairings for this evening's specials." But Brandon was clearly enjoying his performance too much to let it end. "You know, I bet you know all about art, don't you, Maya? It's probably in your blood. All you people are so artistic. The singing, the painting, what do you call it, origami?" He laughed at his own wit while his companions studied their hands. Maya felt something crack inside her chest, a fault line that had been building pressure for 3 years of similar moments. Every condescending smile, every comment about her exotic appearance, every assumption about her background and capabilities. The letter in her pocket suddenly felt less like possibility and more like proof that she deserved better than this. "Actually," she said, her voice still professionally controlled but carrying a new edge, "origami is Japanese. And yes, I do know about art. I have a degree in linguistics from Stanford, where I graduated summa cum laude." The words came out before she could stop them, a crack in her professional armor that immediately made her feel exposed. The table fell silent for a moment, and Maya realized she'd made a tactical error. Revealing her education would only make Brandon feel foolish, and men like him didn't handle feeling foolish well. "Stanford, huh? Well, then you must be really desperate if you're slinging plates instead of using that fancy education. What happened? Couldn't cut it in the real world?" The cruelty in his voice was casual, practiced, the kind of refined brutality that came from a lifetime of never facing consequences for his words. Maya felt the last of her professional composure beginning to fray, but before she could respond, she noticed movement from across the restaurant. David Sterling, Brandon's older brother, was rising from his table, his face flushed with what appeared to be genuine embarrassment. He began walking toward their corner booth, and Maya caught the apologetic look in his eyes. But Brandon, oblivious to his brother's approach, was just getting started. "You know what I think, Maya? I think you're probably one of those typical immigrant sob stories. Parents who sacrificed everything, daughter who was supposed to be the success story. But here you are, serving food to people who actually made something of themselves. It's almost poetic, isn't it?" The restaurant had grown quieter,
other diners beginning to notice the scene unfolding in the corner booth. Maya could feel eyes on her from every direction. Customers, staff, even the kitchen crew who'd paused in their prep work to listen. She was trapped in a spotlight of humiliation, and Brandon Sterling was conducting the orchestra. "David," Sterling's voice cut through the tension like a blade, "that's enough." But Brandon was clearly enjoying himself too much to let it end. "Oh, come on, David. I'm just making conversation with our server, aren't I, Maya? We're having a lovely chat about the American dream and how sometimes it doesn't quite work out the way we planned." Maya felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant, the suffocating pressure of public humiliation mixed with the professional necessity of keeping her job. She thought about her parents, about their sacrifice and dreams for her future, about the rent check she'd need to write next week, about the voice lessons she couldn't afford if she lost this position. But mostly, she thought about the letter in her pocket and what Jessica had said about dreams being worth any sacrifice except the sacrifice of who you were. "Excuse me for just a moment," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm building in her chest. "I need to check on something in the kitchen." She turned and walked away with measured steps, feeling Brandon Sterling's laughter following her like smoke. But behind her, as she passed the bar, she noticed something that made her pause. There, set up on a small stage near the piano, was a microphone. The restaurant occasionally featured live music during special events, and tonight, according to the small sign by the stage, was supposed to be an open mic night starting at 9. Maya glanced at the clock on the wall. 8:45. She thought about 3 years of swallowing insults, of making herself small, of hiding her true self behind professional courtesy. She thought about the letter from Julliard that might contain her last chance at the life she'd always wanted. She thought about her grandmother's words. "Sometimes, little star, the world will try to dim your light. That's when you must shine brightest." Behind her, she could hear Brandon Sterling launching into another story about his art collection, his voice carrying the satisfied tone of a man who believed he'd successfully put someone in their place. Around the restaurant, conversations had resumed their normal volume, the brief drama already fading into background noise. But Maya Chen was no longer thinking about being invisible. She was thinking about what it might feel like to be seen, really seen, for who she really was. The microphone waited on its stand like a question mark, and Maya found herself walking toward it before she'd consciously made the decision to do so. Her hand went to the letter in her pocket, and for the first time all day, she felt ready to open it. Because suddenly, it didn't matter what it said. Win or lose, acceptance or rejection, Maya had spent 3 years letting other people define her worth. Tonight, she was going to define it herself. The stage was only 3 steps up, but as Maya climbed them, it felt like she was ascending toward a different version of her life. Behind her, Brandon Sterling's laughter continued, oblivious to what was about to happen. Around the restaurant, the usual Tuesday evening routine continued. Servers taking orders, wine glasses clinking, the quiet murmur of the wealthy at their leisure. Maya reached for the microphone with hands that were surprisingly steady, and as she did, she caught sight of her reflection in the dark window. For the first time in years, she looked like herself. Not the waitress, not the dutiful daughter, but the woman who had once stood on a stage at Stanford and brought an audience to tears with her voice. "Excuse me," she said into the microphone, her voice carrying clearly through the restaurant's sound system. Conversations began to pause as diners looked up from their meals, curious about this unexpected interruption to their evening. At table 21, Brandon Sterling finally stopped talking, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion to something that might have been concerning. David Sterling, still standing near the booth, crossed his arms and watched with interest. Maya looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some irritated, some genuinely interested in what this young woman in a server's uniform might have to say. In the back, she could see Jessica and Carlos and the other staff members who'd paused in their work to listen. And suddenly, Maya knew exactly what she wanted to say. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice stronger now, carrying the power and precision of years of training. "My name is Maya Chen, and I've been your server at the Emerald Room for 3 years. Tonight, someone suggested that I might have quite a story to tell. They were right." She paused, feeling the weight of the moment, the sense of standing at the edge of something irreversible. In her pocket, the letter from Julliard seemed to pulse with possibility. But for the first time, Maya realized that whatever it contained, she was already exactly where she needed to be. "This is my story," she said into the microphone, and the restaurant fell completely silent. As Maya stood on the small stage, her heart hammering against her ribs, she became acutely aware of every detail around her. The soft jazz that had been playing through the restaurant's sound system had been muted, leaving only the ambient sounds of the city 42 floors below. The scent of expensive perfume and fine wine hung in the air like invisible tapestries, and the chandelier light caught the expectant faces turned toward her like flowers following the sun. At table 12, an elderly woman in pearls had set down her soup spoon and was watching with the kind of intense attention usually reserved for Broadway premieres. Near the kitchen doors, the entire wait staff had gathered, their usual Tuesday evening routines forgotten in favor of this unprecedented moment. Chef Bernard had even emerged from his domain, wiping his hands on his apron as he joined the audience of his own restaurant. Maya's eyes swept across the room, taking in faces she'd served for months or years. There was Mr. Petrovsky, the Russian businessman who always ordered his steak Pittsburgh rare and never spoke to her beyond pointing at menu items. Mrs. Kim, the fashion designer who came in every Tuesday with different wealthy friends but always sat alone at her phone. The Hendersons, who celebrated every anniversary here and always requested table 6 because it was where he'd proposed 30 years ago. These people had been part of her daily landscape for 3 years, but tonight, for the first time, they were seeing her as more than just the woman who brought their food. "My story," continued Maya, her voice gaining strength as she found her rhythm, "is not the one that was just told about me. I wasn't brought here on a boat, and I didn't arrive as some exotic refugee seeking the American dream. I was born in Sacramento, California, to 2 immigrants who came here legally, with engineering degrees and hearts full of hope for their daughter's future." She could see Brandon Sterling's face reddening, his earlier confidence evaporating as he realized his casual cruelty was being broadcast to the entire restaurant. His companions had all but turned their backs on him, some literally shifting in their seats to face the stage instead of their host. "I graduated summa cum laude from Stanford University with a degree in linguistics. I speak 4 languages fluently: English, Mandarin, Spanish, and French. I can read ancient Greek and Latin. I've studied the poetry of a dozen cultures and can explain the linguistic evolution that brought us from Proto-Indo-European to the words we're speaking right now." She paused, looking around the room one more time. The faces looking back at her were transformed, some ashamed, some inspired, some simply awakened to a perspective they'd never considered. "And to the person who thought it was appropriate to mock my background, my appearance, and my dreams, I hope you learned something from this moment. I hope you realize that cruelty is a choice, just like kindness is a choice. I hope you choose better in the future." Brandon Sterling was now actively hiding behind his menu, but Maya could see his hands shaking. "Thank you," Maya said into the microphone, her voice now soft, but carrying clearly through the silent restaurant. "Thank you for listening to my story. And thank you for reminding me that I deserve to be heard." She set the microphone back on its stand and stepped down from the stage. For a moment, the entire restaurant remained silent, as if collectively holding its breath. Then the applause began again, slower this time, more reverent, like the kind of appreciation reserved for moments that change people. As Maya walked through the dining room, every person she passed stood up. Mrs. Patterson reached out to squeeze her hand, whispering, "Brava, dear one, brava." Mr. Reyes, the sommelier, had tears streaming down his face. Even the typically stoic Chef Bernard nodded at her with what looked like respect bordering on awe. When she reached table 21, David Sterling stood and extended his hand. "Ms. Chen," he said formally, "it would be an honor to shake your hand. What you just did, that took courage I'm not sure I possess." Maya shook his hand, noting the genuine warmth in his eyes. Then she looked at Brandon, who was still staring at his menu like it might contain escape routes. "Sir," she said quietly so only their table could hear, "I'll be right back to take your order. I believe you were interested in the wine pairings." Brandon looked up at her, his face a mixture of shame and something that might have been the beginning of recognition. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I don't know what—" "I'm sorry." Maya nodded. Apology accepted. Now, about those drinks. The aftermath of Maya's speech rippled through the emerald room like concentric circles spreading across still water. As Maya returned to the bar to collect water glasses, the normal rhythm of dinner service had been completely disrupted. Conversations that had been temporarily paused were now resuming with an entirely different energy. Diners were looking at their servers with new eyes, some calling them by name for the first time, others asking questions about their backgrounds that went beyond mere politeness. Jessica appeared at Maya's elbow, her face flushed with excitement and something that looked like pride. "Maya, I knew you had it in you, but that was incredible. The entire kitchen is buzzing. Chef Bernard wants to buy you dinner, and Mrs. Patterson has been asking every server if they know where you went to college." Maya felt a strange sense of disconnection from the moment, as if she were watching it happen to someone else. The adrenaline from standing on stage was beginning to fade, replaced by the slowly dawning realization of what she'd just done. She'd essentially called out a wealthy customer in front of the entire restaurant, broken nearly every rule of service industry survival, and probably guaranteed herself a conversation with Gerald that would end with her cleaning out her locker. But strangely, she didn't feel regret. Instead, she felt a clarity she hadn't experienced in years, as if someone had wiped fog from a mirror, and she could finally see herself clearly. "I should probably get back to my tables," Maya said, straightening her apron with hands that were finally steady. "Brandon Sterling still needs his wine pairings." Jessica stared at her. "You're going back to serve them? After what just happened?" "It's my job. And despite what his brother did, David Sterling and the rest of their party don't deserve poor service because one person behaved badly." As Maya gathered fresh water glasses and headed back toward table 21, she became aware of the subtle changes happening throughout the restaurant. At table 4, a woman in an expensive suit was engaged in what appeared to be a deep conversation with her server, Anna, about the art history degree Anna was pursuing at night. At table 15, Mr. Chen, the tech entrepreneur, was asking his busboy Roberto about his family in El Salvador, a conversation that would have been unthinkable an hour earlier. But it was table 8 that stopped Maya in her tracks. Mrs. Kim, the fashion designer who usually spent entire meals staring at her phone, had set her device aside completely and was listening intently as her server Marcus described his plans to open a small catering business. More remarkably, she was taking notes. "Excuse me," Mrs. Kim called out as Maya passed. "Are you the young woman who just spoke, the one going to Julliard?" Maya nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious again. "Yes, ma'am."
"I'm Helen Kim," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "I own 3 boutiques in Soho, and I've been coming here for 2 years. I'm ashamed to say I never learned Marcus's name until tonight, despite the fact that he's given me consistently excellent service and apparently has one of the most interesting backgrounds I've ever heard." Marcus, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had immigrated from Lebanon, looked embarrassed but pleased by the attention. "What you did up there," Mrs. Kim continued, "that took guts. It also made me take a hard look at my own behavior. I'd like to make you an offer." Maya felt her heart skip. "Ma'am?" "I host fashion events, gallery openings, private parties for clients. I always hire musicians for ambiance, usually classical or jazz. If you're interested, I'd love to book you for my next event.
It's not Carnegie Hall, but it's professional performance work that pays well. And, she glanced at Marcus, I'll be hiring Marcus's catering company to provide the food. Marcus's eyes widened. Mrs. Kim, that's very generous, but I don't have a catering company yet. It's just an idea. Then it's time to make it a reality, she said firmly. I'll advance you the money for licensing and initial supplies. Consider it an investment in untapped talent. Maya felt her heart skip. Thank you, she managed. Both of you. Thank you. As she continued toward table 21, Maya became aware that similar conversations were happening throughout the restaurant. It was as if her speech had given permission for genuine human connection in a space that had previously operated on the careful choreography of class distinctions. When she reached the Sterling table, she found a dramatically different scene from the one she'd left. Brandon was no longer holding court, but instead sat quietly, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. His companions were engaged in their own conversations, no longer hanging on his every word. And David Sterling was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. I don't care what the board says, Patricia. Brandon needs to step down from the foundation. Tonight proved that his judgment is fundamentally compromised. Yes, I know he's my brother. That's exactly why I can't let this slide. Maya approached the table with professional composure, though she couldn't help but notice that Brandon flinched slightly when he saw her. Gentlemen, she said warmly, I apologize for the delay. Are you ready to hear about our wine pairings? David ended his call and looked at her with something approaching wonder. Ms. Chen, before we talk about wine, I need to say something. What you did tonight, that was extraordinary. You've given me a lot to think about, both personally and professionally. He gestured to his brother, who was studying his hands with the intensity of someone who discovered they were attached to his arms. Brandon has something he'd like to say to you as well. Brandon looked up, and Maya was surprised to see what appeared to be genuine remorse in his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of its earlier arrogance. Miss Chen, I don't have words for how sorry I am. What I said to you was inexcusable. It was racist, it was cruel, and it came from a place of ignorance and privilege that I'm just now beginning to understand. He paused, swallowing hard. I grew up in a bubble where people like me never faced consequences for our words or actions. Tonight, you held up a mirror, and I don't like what I see. Maya studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance, but what she saw instead was the uncomfortable awakening of someone confronting their own ugliness for the first time. I appreciate your apology, she said carefully, and I hope you mean it. I do, Brandon said quickly, and I want you to know I've just made some calls. I'm donating $1 million to a scholarship fund for service workers pursuing arts education. It's not enough to undo what I said, but maybe it can help other people like you achieve their dreams without having to endure what you have. Maya blinked, momentarily speechless. That's very generous, Mr. Sterling. It's the least I can do, Brandon said. And I want you to know, when you start at Julliard, if you need any additional financial support, please don't hesitate to ask. I may not be able to undo my ignorance, but I can at least put my money where my mouth should have been in the first place. David Sterling was nodding approvingly at his brother's words, but Maya could see the calculation in his eyes. He was thinking about damage control, about the Sterling family reputation, about the conversations that would inevitably follow tonight's events. There's something else, David added. I'm the chairman of the Sterling Foundation, which funds arts education programs throughout the city. After what happened tonight, I think it's time we reassessed our funding priorities. Ms. Chen, would you be willing to consult with us on programs that specifically support working artists and students from underserved communities?
Maya felt the room spinning slightly. An hour ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was being offered consulting positions and scholarship funds. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Yes, I think I'd be very interested in that, she managed. Excellent, David said. My assistant will be in touch. He pulled out his business card and handed it to her. And, Miss Chen, thank you.
you've reminded me why I got into philanthropy in the first place. It's easy to lose sight of the human impact when you're dealing with budgets and board meetings. As Maya pocketed the business card, she became aware that their conversation was being watched by much of the restaurant. Word of Brandon's apology and the Sterling Foundation's new initiatives was already spreading from table to table, creating a buzz of excitement and possibility. Gerald, the restaurant manager, appeared at her elbow with an expression she'd never seen before. Not the usual nervous deference he showed wealthy customers, but something that looked almost like respect. "Maya," he said quietly, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Maya's stomach dropped. This was it, the moment when reality reasserted itself and she got fired for breaking every rule of customer service. "Of course," she said, following him toward the host station. But instead of the termination speech she was expecting, Gerald surprised her. "In 20 years of restaurant management, I've never seen anything like what just happened. What you did tonight, standing up for yourself, for all of us in this industry, that took incredible courage." Maya waited for the "but" that surely had to follow. "I want you to know," Gerald continued, "that you have a job here for as long as you want it. More than that, I'm promoting you to training supervisor for our new staff. I want every server who works here to understand what you demonstrated tonight, that we can provide excellent service while maintaining our dignity and self-respect." Maya felt tears forming again. "Gerald, thank you, but I'll be starting at Julliard in the spring." "Which is why this is perfect timing. You'll be able to train the next generation of servers before you leave, and we'll work around your class schedule for as long as you need. Consider it our investment in future excellence." As Gerald walked away, Maya found herself standing in the middle of the Emerald Room, surrounded by the transformed energy she'd somehow created. Conversations were happening at every table, real conversations between people who had previously existed in separate worlds. She could see Mrs. Patterson showing photos of her grandchildren to her server and hear Mr. Petrovsky asking his busboy about his studies in broken but earnest English. Jessica appeared beside her again, grinning from ear to ear. "So, how does it feel to accidentally start a revolution?" Maya looked around the restaurant, at the connections being forged, the assumptions being challenged, the simple human dignity being recognized, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not just satisfaction or pride, but a sense of purpose that went far beyond her own dreams. "It feels," she said slowly, "like the beginning of something bigger than I ever imagined." But even as she spoke, Maya knew that tonight was just the start. The real work, building on these moments of connection, sustaining the change that had begun, that would take time, effort, and the kind of sustained commitment that went far beyond one spectacular speech. Still, as she watched Carlos teaching a curious diner how to properly pronounce the name of a Spanish wine, as she saw Anna exchanging contact information with the businessman who wanted to support her art history studies, as she felt the weight of possibility settling around her shoulders like a familiar shawl, Maya Chen knew that she had finally stopped being invisible. And that, she realized, was the most powerful transformation of all. 3 months after what became known throughout Manhattan's service industry as the Emerald Room speech, Maya Chen stood in front of her bathroom mirror in a significantly larger apartment, preparing for what would prove to be another transformative evening. The cramped studio in Astoria had been replaced with a one-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights, complete with a piano by the window and enough space for proper vocal practice without disturbing neighbors. The Sterling Foundation had moved quickly on their promises. Within 2 weeks, Brandon Sterling's $1 million donation had been matched by contributions from other wealthy patrons who had been present that night, creating a fund that would ultimately provide full scholarships for over 50 working artists pursuing advanced degrees. Maya had been hired as the fund's first director, a part-time position that allowed her to continue at the Emerald Room while preparing for Julliard. But perhaps the most unexpected change had been in Brandon Sterling himself. "Maya, you ready for tonight?" Jessica called from the living room, where she was helping Maya prepare for the evening's event, a fundraising gala for the newly established Dignity in Service Scholarship Program. "Almost," Maya replied, adjusting the simple but elegant black dress that Helen Kim had insisted on providing. It was beautiful without being ostentatious, professional without hiding her personality. Over the past 3 months, Mrs. Kim had become an unexpected mentor, guiding Maya through the complex world of networking and philanthropy while ensuring she never lost sight of her core values. The fundraising gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in the Temple of Dender's soaring space where Egyptian antiquity met Manhattan sophistication. Maya would be performing, her first professional solo since accepting her Julliard placement, alongside Marcus's catering company providing the food and a dozen other businesses owned by service workers who had been inspired to pursue their entrepreneurial dreams. As Maya gathered her things, her phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source, Brandon Sterling. Over the past 3 months, he had become an unlikely ally in the scholarship program, using his connections and resources to amplify the initiative while maintaining a deliberately low profile. "Break a leg tonight," his message read. "Thank you for changing my life. B." The transformation in Brandon had been the most surprising development of all. What had started as damage control and guilty conscience had evolved into what appeared to be genuine personal growth. He had enrolled in diversity and inclusion workshops, begun volunteering at local community centers, and most remarkably, had started working shifts at a soup kitchen without any publicity or fanfare. When Maya had asked him about it during one of their scholarship planning meetings, he'd simply said, "I needed to understand what it means to serve others instead of being served." The taxi ride to the Met gave Maya time to reflect on how completely her life had transformed. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, hiding her dreams and accepting casual cruelty as the price of employment. Now she was preparing to perform at one of New York's most prestigious venues, in front of an audience that included some of the city's most influential philanthropists, all because she had finally found the courage to tell her story. The Temple of Dendur was breathtaking in the evening light. The ancient Egyptian temple reflected in the pool of water, while Manhattan's skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tables decorated with simple elegance filled the space, and Maya could see familiar faces throughout the crowd. Customers from the Emerald Room, fellow service workers, arts patrons, and journalists covering the event. "Maya," Mrs. Patterson appeared at her elbow, more animated than Maya had ever seen her. "Dear, you look absolutely radiant. Jonathan and I wouldn't miss this for the world. We've already donated to 3 scholarship recipients, and the evening hasn't even started." The elderly couple had become unlikely champions of the cause, using their social connections to spread awareness about the scholarship program throughout their wealthy circles. Maya had learned that Mrs. Patterson had herself worked as a seamstress before marrying Jonathan, a fact she'd never shared in all her years of dining at the Emerald Room. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you so much for being here," Maya said, genuinely moved by the support, "and thank you for everything you've done to help other students." "Nonsense, dear. You opened our eyes to something we should have seen years ago. The least we can do is put our privilege to good use." As Maya made her way through the crowd, she was struck by the diversity of the gathering. This wasn't the usual Manhattan charity circuit where the same rich faces appeared at every gala. Instead, it was a genuine mixing of communities: service workers standing alongside philanthropists, immigrants sharing stories with society matrons, artists connecting with potential patrons who were seeing them as individuals for the first time. "Maya," David Sterling approached with a warm smile, accompanied by a woman Maya recognized as his wife, Patricia. "Thank you for making this evening possible." Patricia has been working with the Foundation's board to establish similar programs in 3 other cities. The response has been overwhelming. We've received applications from restaurant workers, hotel housekeepers, retail employees, people from every corner of the service industry who have dreams they've been forced to defer. Your speech created a movement, Maya. Maya felt the familiar mix of pride and responsibility that had become constant companions over the past 3 months. With visibility came obligation, to the scholarship recipients, to the service workers still struggling in invisibility, to the cause she had inadvertently started. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Maya made her way to the backstage area, a small space behind the temple where performers prepared. Her hands were steady as she warmed up her voice, running through scales and breathing exercises that had become second nature over years of practice. Tonight's performance would be different from her impromptu speech at the Emerald Room. This was planned, professional, the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of for years.
But as she prepared, Maya realized that the dream itself had evolved. Yes, she still wanted to sing, still planned to excel at Julliard, still hoped for a career that would allow her to share her voice with the world. But now that dream was intertwined with something larger, a commitment to ensuring that other people's dreams weren't silenced by circumstance, prejudice, or economic necessity. Maya? A familiar voice made her turn. Carlos stood in the doorway, wearing a suit Maya had never seen him in, looking nervous but proud. "I wanted to thank you, mija. My Maria, the cancer treatment, it's working, and the fund it paid for her medications when our insurance wouldn't cover them." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. The scholarship fund had expanded beyond education to include emergency assistance for service workers facing medical crises, job loss, or other unexpected hardships. It had become a safety net for people who had spent their lives creating safety for others. "Carlos, that's wonderful news about Maria, and you don't need to thank me. We're all in this together." "No, mija," Carlos said firmly. "You started something that night. You gave us permission to be seen. That's a gift I'll never forget." The program began with remarks from David Sterling about the Foundation's expanded mission, followed by testimonials from scholarship recipients. Maya watched from the wings as Anna, her former colleague from the Emerald Room, spoke about starting her master's program in art history. Roberto, Carlos's colleague, described his plans to become a social worker, specializing in immigrant services. Marcus detailed the growth of his catering business and his plans to hire exclusively from the pool of unemployed restaurant workers. Each story was a testament to the power of opportunity, but also to the resilience and talent that had always existed, waiting only for recognition and support. "And now," David Sterling announced, "please welcome the young woman whose courage started this movement, performing a selection from Puccini's La Bohème, Maya Chen." Maya walked onto the stage with confidence, born not of arrogance, but of purpose. The Temple of Dendure's acoustics were magnificent, and as she began to sing Mimi's aria, Quando man vo, her voice soared through the space with power and precision that brought the audience to absolute silence. The aria, about a young woman demanding to be seen and appreciated for who she truly is, felt perfectly chosen for the moment. As Maya sang, she could see faces in the audience transformed by the music, some crying, some smiling, all completely absorbed in the emotion she was conveying. But midway through the performance, something unexpected happened. In the audience, she spotted a familiar figure who made her voice catch momentarily. Brandon Sterling was sitting alone at a table near the back, and he was openly weeping. Maya had learned, through their work together on the scholarship program, that Brandon's cruelty had stemmed from deep insecurity and a lifetime of using others' diminishment to inflate his own sense of worth. Seeing him there, isolated by his own past behavior but present by choice, Maya felt a surge of compassion that transformed her performance. Her voice took on new depths of understanding, forgiveness, and hope. This wasn't just about her story anymore. It was about the possibility of redemption, growth, and second chances for everyone. When the aria ended, the silence stretched for a few heartbeats before the audience erupted in thunderous applause. Maya could see people standing, some rushing to wipe away tears, others reaching for their phones to make what she suspected were spontaneous donations.
But what moved her most was watching Brandon Sterling rise to his feet, applauding with the kind of genuine appreciation that spoke to someone who had learned to recognize authentic beauty after years of mistaking wealth for worth. As Maya took her bow, she caught her reflection in the windows overlooking Central Park. 6 months ago, she was invisible. Tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, seen, heard, and using her voice not just to pursue her own dreams, but to lift others toward theirs. The evening concluded with the announcement that the scholarship fund had raised over $5 million, enough to support educational opportunities for service workers throughout the tri-state area. But more than the money, Maya realized, was the network of connections that had been forged, relationships between communities that had previously existed in parallel without ever truly meeting. As the guests began to mingle during the reception, Maya found herself approached by a young woman whom she felt like she knew but couldn't quite place. "Miss Chen?" the woman said nervously. "My name's Sofia Rodriguez. I'm a housekeeper at the Plaza Hotel. And I was at the Emerald Room that night. My cousin works in your kitchen. I wanted to thank you for what you said, because it gave me the courage to apply for the scholarship program."
Maya smiled warmly. "Sophia, it's wonderful to meet you. What are you planning to study?" "Social work," Sophia said, her face lighting up. "I want to help other immigrant women navigate the system, find resources, and understand their rights. Your speech made me realize that my experience, the struggles I faced, those aren't things to be ashamed of. They're qualifications." Maya felt that familiar flutter of purpose in her chest. "Sophia, that's exactly right. Our experiences, our struggles, they're not obstacles to overcome. They're wisdom we can share." As the evening wound down, Maya found herself standing once again beside the Temple of Dendur, looking out at the city lights reflected in the water. The ancient Egyptian temple, transported stone by stone to this modern setting, seemed like a perfect metaphor for transformation. Old stories finding new contexts, ancient wisdom speaking to contemporary challenges. "Maya!" Brandon Sterling approached hesitantly, as if unsure of his welcome. Over the past 3 months, their working relationship had been professional but careful, marked by his genuine efforts at redemption and her cautious willingness to believe in second chances. "Brandon," she said, turning to face him fully, "thank you for coming tonight and for everything you've done for the scholarship program." He nodded, looking older somehow than he had that night at the Emerald Room, worn down by the hard work of examining his own prejudices. "Maya, I need you to know, what you did that night, calling me out, holding up that mirror, it saved me from becoming someone I would have hated. I was already that person, I just couldn't see it." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine transformation rather than performance. "People can change, Brandon. You've proven that." "I hope so," he said quietly. "I hope I spend the rest of my life proving it." As Maya watched him walk away, rejoining the crowd of people whose lives had been touched by her moment of courage, she realized that her grandmother had been right all along. Hearts did speak all languages. Sometimes they just needed permission to start the conversation. The revolution that had begun with one woman refusing to remain invisible was only just beginning.